You flip a light switch without thinking. For almost all of human history, light at dusk meant a man walking to every flame by hand. There was a profession that existed only to fight the dark, and it vanished so completely you never knew it was there. After dark on a London street, before any man had been hired to light the city's lamps, you could not see your own hand. You could not see the cobblestones beneath your feet. And if you were poor or old or female, or returning home from a late shift, the dark had already chosen you. This was the city that the lamplighter was built to fight. Long before any gas flame lit a single London thoroughfare, the night was a place you did not want to be. Wealthy gentlemen hired sedan chairs to be carried home, but the chair needed a light to follow. That is how the link boy made his living. Children, mostly too young for heavier work, were sent ahead of carriages and chairs carrying a flaming link, a length of rope soaked in pitch and tar that burned with a fierce, smoking light. The link boy walked first, holding his torch high, and the chair followed in his glow. For a small fee, he lit your way home. He also led you into ambushes. Records from the period speak of link boys hired by footpads to walk clients straight to a quiet doorway where a thief waited. Some link boys were robbed themselves. Some were abused or hired out by families who could not feed them. The dark ate the cheapest body it could find first. There was also the official answer to the night, the parish watch. Established under the Statute of Winchester in 1285 and formalized across London by the late 17th century, the night watch was a band of older men, sometimes pensioners, sometimes just locals, paid a pittance to patrol. They called the hours from the streets. They checked that doors were locked. They watched for fire. They were also, in the polite phrase of the period, lampooned. Satirists drew them drunk, sleeping, slow. The watchman's lantern was a dim, swinging thing in the hand of a man who had every reason to look the other way. They were a ritual, not a remedy. So what did the dark actually do? It picked pockets along the river stairs. It tipped sedan chairs into unmarked pits. It let thieves strip a cart that had stopped to rest. It hid every cellar entrance, every broken flagstone, every open stairwell to the river. A wrong step in the wrong alley could mean a broken leg, a robbery, a body pulled from the Thames at dawn. It killed slowly, mostly, but it killed, and the body count fell hardest on those who walked home after dark because they had to. Laundresses finishing the last rinse. Bakers whose ovens started at 3 in the morning. Housemaids scrubbing through the night. Night shift weavers and tailors. Women turned away from inns for being unaccompanied. The poor, the old, the late shift worker. These were the people the dark was eating every night in every city that had not yet decided to pay for street lamps. When a city finally decided it would pay to light its streets, it was not buying beauty. It was buying a kind of life insurance. The lamps were not for the gentlemen in their coaches. They were for everyone else. Picture the job. It is dusk in Lowell, Massachusetts in 1872, and a man is walking his route. He carries a brass-tipped staff about 10 feet long. At the working end, there's a small wick and a small hook. The wick lights the gas. The hook opens the lamp's window to snuff the flame. He also carries a ladder because some lamps are mounted high on iron posts, and the post itself was built for him. About 2/3 of the way up, there is a horizontal bar where he can rest the ladder's top while he works. His route is fixed, 70, 80 lamps, depending on the district. Each lamp post sits roughly 65 meters from the next, a distance calculated so that one pool of dim gaslight would overlap the next, even with soot and fog. He does not rush. He stops at every post. He climbs, opens the valve, touches the wick to the mantle. He listens for the soft hiss of a lit lamp catching. He moves on. The brass pole had weight to it, 10 feet of it. He learned to balance it on his shoulder as he walked, the hook hanging behind him, the wick end forward. He learned the rhythm of the route. Climb, light, descend, walk. Climb, light, descend, walk. His footsteps on the cobblestones were as regular as a metronome. His neighbors timed their evenings by them. The dusk walk took its time. He knew which mantles held their flame and which valves were slow to open, which posts had been bent by a passing cart and needed a second try with the ladder. The smell of coal gas hung in the air as each lamp lit, faint, sharp, and faintly sweet. By the time he reached the end of his route, the sun was gone, and the street behind him was a chain of small lights, each one only as bright as it needed to be. He walked the same route again at dawn, snuffing each flame in reverse. You cannot blow out a gas mantle, so he used the hook to lift the glass and a small snuffer at the end of the pole to close the flame shut. Then he went home and ate breakfast. That was not the end of the workday. That was the end of the night's work. In the daytime, the lamplighter cleaned. That was the bulk of the labor, the part nobody talks about when they remember the soft glow. Each lamp had to be wiped, the glass polished, the soot cleared from the inside, the mantle inspected, the valve checked for leaks. He carried rags and a small bottle of oil for the hinges. He carried a step stool for the lamps mounted lower. A late 19th century lamplighter in Lowell might earn roughly $2 a day for this. The walking, the climbing, the cleaning, the snuffing. In summer, the route drew its own small economy. Naturalists and children trailed him with nets and jars, paying a quarter or $half for the moths and beetles drawn to the gas flames. They were called bug cranks. They were part of the walk, and the lamplighter, if he had the time, would slow his route to let them work. In winter, the walk was different. Cold hands on a brass pole, black ice under the ladder's feet, a longer dark to cover. He walked his route at dusk, lighting every flame, then walked it again at dawn to put them out. The snow drifted against the curb. The wind cut through his collar. The lampost's horizontal bar held a layer of frost that had to be brushed off before he could rest the ladder against it. There were nights when a single lamp took him 10 minutes to light, and the next one was 100 meters away in the same wind. By doing this walk twice a day in any weather, he extended the usable day of the city itself. In winter, he gave the neighborhood 90 extra minutes of public life after sunset. In summer, 30. Before the lamplighter, the day had two halves. The sun came up and the city moved. The sun went down and the city hid. After the lamplighter, there was a third. A small half hour in winter, longer in summer, when the gas lamps burned and the city stayed open. A shopkeeper could tidy his window display after dark. A wife could walk home from the wash house without fear. A child could be sent on an errand at dusk instead of before. The lamplighter did not just light a lamp. He opened the city's second daytime. For most of a year, he never thought about what he was doing. He was just doing the route. But what he was doing was changing what time it was for every house on it. This is the work. And somewhere in the middle of it, without anyone planning it that way, the lamplighter became something else. In most cities, the lamplighter was something more than the man who lit lamps. He was the slow, two-a-day heartbeat of the neighborhood. He knew the dog on the corner. He knew which shutters stayed open late. He knew which front door had been broken since last winter and never fixed. He was, in the dry municipal phrase of his job description, a pair of eyes on his route. He walked it alone. He walked it twice. He walked it in any weather, in fog, in black frost, in summer rain. And because he walked it at the hours when everyone else was asleep or going to sleep, he was often the only person awake on the block. For an hour or more, depending on the length of the route, his walk was the patrol. The city never wrote this down as a duty. But look at the streets and you can see what was actually being built. The horizontal bar 2/3 up each lamppost was a ladder rest, a place to steady the ladder's top while he worked. The 65-meter spacing between posts was chosen so that one dim pool of gaslight would overlap the next, even with soot and fog. The fixed route meant that the lamplighter walked the same path in the same order, every evening, every morning, year after year. The homeowners on that route could set their clocks by his footsteps on the cobblestones. A missed lamp drew a complaint to the superintendent the same day. The lamp's flame was a public promise, and the lamplighter was the person who kept it. The role expanded almost by accident. In some cities, the lamplighter doubled as an informal constable. In others, he was the only municipal worker the neighborhood saw twice a day. He noticed the open cellar. He noticed the broken gate. He noticed the figure loitering under a lamp that had not yet been lit. He did not carry a truncheon. He carried a brass pole, a ladder, and a routine so consistent that the entire street could plan its evening around him. For older working-class men, the job was also a kind of anchor. The hours were odd, but the work was stable. The route was yours. The wage came whether the weather broke or not. A man who lit the lamps on a block for 10 years knew that block better than any constable ever would. A French writer saw this without trying to. In 1943, Antoine de Saint-Exupéry published The Little Prince. In chapter 14, the Little Prince meets a lamplighter on a tiny planet where the days last only a moment. The man is ordered to light his lamp and put it out, over and over, with no rest. The prince asks why. The lamplighter says he is devoted to something. It is the only adult the prince finds touching. Saint-Exupéry understood that the lamp did not matter, the devotion did, and the city never noticed what it had, until the devotion was no longer needed. The end did not arrive the way people remember. It did not arrive with electric lights sweeping the city in a single season, or a single famous retirement, or a final walk to a single lamp. It arrived the way most endings do, one route at a time, over 70 years. The profession's last act had already begun before its prime. On the 4th of June, 1807, a German-born promoter named Frederick Albert Windsor staged a demonstration on Pall Mall for the birthday of King George III. He strung gas lamps along the wall of Carlton House. That evening, for the first time in London, the public street glowed without a man lighting it. Crowds came to watch the wall burn. It worked. Windsor had already lost control of his company by then, but the demonstration stuck. Within 16 years, 40,000 gas lamps covered 215 miles of London. Baltimore followed in 1817. Rembrandt Peale formed the Gas Light Company of Baltimore, lit the city's first gas street lamps, and within decades, American cities were duplicating the model. So why, if gas arrived in 1807, were there still lamplighters? Because the lamp was gas-fired, but the lighting was still manual. The flame still had to be touched by a wick at dusk. The route still had to be walked. The job changed in scale and pay, but it did not vanish. What began to kill it was not electricity. It was the clock. Late in the 19th century, engineers started fitting gas lamps with mechanical clockwork timers and pilot lights. The valve opened itself at dusk. The valve closed itself at dawn. A timer walked the route that a man had walked. For some lamps, the lamplighter's work shrank to maintenance only. For others, his route simply closed. Electric arc lighting reached the major thoroughfares by the 1880s. New York's avenues glowed under strung wires by 1893, more than 1,500 arc lamps in place. But the arc lamps lit the wide avenues and the shopping districts. The residential streets, the lanes behind the houses, the long curving roads on the edges of town were still gas, and the gas was still lit by hand. The transition was not a wave. It was a slow, selective replacement, block by block, contract by contract. As late as the 1930s, nearly half of London's street lamps still burned gas, lit by a man. The lamplighter was still on the route, but the route was shrinking year by year, as one street after another was rewired or fitted with a timer. The lampposts stood where they had always stood. The men beside them just stopped showing up. Baltimore did not extinguish its last gas lamps until 1957. That is the city's full goodbye. From the first gaslight in 1817 to the last in 1957, the lamplighter's job on those Baltimore streets lasted 140 years. This is the strange part. There is no famous last lamplighter of London, or Baltimore, or New York. No retirement ceremony. No final route walked for a newspaper. The profession simply thinned out, route by route, contract by contract, decade by decade. The grandfather lit the lamps by hand, in any weather, on a fixed block, for a brass pole and a few dollars a day. His grandson was retired by a timer and probably never knew that his own grandfather had once walked that same block twice a day. With a ladder on his shoulder, in fog so thick the next lamppost vanished before he reached it. The men themselves, when their routes closed, mostly just moved on. Some moved to other municipal jobs. Some retired quietly. Some died with no record of the last route they had walked. The lamps they had tended kept burning, but a different flame, lit by a different mechanism. The man who had decided what time it was for that block, the man whose footsteps on the cobblestones the neighbors had learned to listen for, was simply not replaced. Today, in parts of central London, around Westminster and the older royal parks, around 1,500 gas lamps still burn at dusk. They are not on automatic timers. They are lit by hand. 5 men still do it. One of them is Gary Usher. On a winter evening, you can find him on Cowley Street, just behind Westminster Abbey, climbing a small ladder against a Victorian lamppost, opening the glass, and touching a long taper to the mantle. He winds the clockwork that will snuff the lamp again at dawn. He polishes the glass. He moves to the next lamp and the next until his route is done. It is the same brass-tipped pole, the same hiss of gas that has echoed on London streets for 2 centuries. The job has not changed. The streets have. This is not a profession anymore. It is a museum practice. The 5 men who still do this in London, and the few who still do it in cities like Zagreb or Wrocław, are keeping a craft alive the way a violin maker keeps a craft alive. Not because orchestras still need violins, but because the violins exist and someone has to know how to tune them. Picture the alternative: a darkened room. A hand reaches for the switch on the wall. The light comes on instantly. No one walked to do that. No one climbed a ladder in the cold. No one touched a wick to a mantle and listened for the soft hiss of a flame catching. No one will walk the block tonight, and the block will be lit anyway. The light you flick without thinking is built on a profession that fought the dark, on foot, twice a day, in any weather, for 150 years. It did not vanish because the work was done badly. It vanished because the work no longer needed a body to do it. The lamplighter was not replaced. He was simply no longer required, and what we lost in that quiet, decades-long subtraction was not just a job. It was the slow, 2-a-day human presence on the block that had, for over a century, been the city's quietest form of safety, its most reliable clock, and the last pair of eyes on the street before morning. Reach for the switch. The light comes on. No one walked to do that, and no one ever will again. If this story made you look at the lights on your street a little differently tonight, subscribe and come back tomorrow. We are here every day with another origin you have probably never thought to ask about.